Ooh, welcome into another episode of Necessary Roughness right here on Bite Size Sports. As always, I'm your host, John, joined by Ben Parker. We're going to talk, begrudgingly, we're going to talk some NFC South
Mm.
today. Uh, Rough division to cover, but I hope you'll join in with us. Let us know your thoughts on these teams as we kind of go through our prompts, and we'll try to move through it pretty quick. First and foremost, Ben, we had a bit of a week off. How you been? How's the off season treating you?
No, I'm good. Listen, NFC South, man, somebody's got to do it, but it might as well be us, all right? If somebody's got to do it, we may be as well the people that take out the trash and clean up the poop and do everything else, okay? But here we come. We are ready for it.
Yes. It's not too bad for a chore, but it still feels like one. All right, so let's jump into a team that every time they enter an off season, you're kind of, I mean, over the last 10 years, you've kind of been interested to see how exactly they get out of the red and still make some additions, and they always manage to. And that's the New Orleans Saints. If nothing changes, which it will, they're projected to have negative $54 million in cap space as it stands right now. Obviously, there's some buttons they can push to restructure things and create some cap space for themselves. But we wanted to center this around free agency a little bit, and then we'll get Ben's prospect of the week at the end of the show. And maybe a guy who you've watched. Maybe at the end we can say who would be your favorite landing spot for him, out of this division potentially to kind of tie it all together. But first and foremost, we're going to start with the Saints, and I want to know from you, Ben, what you decided was the outgoing free agent you think they need to re-sign. Who is the most important outgoing free agent in your opinion for the Saints here this offseason?
Yeah, so I'll get to that in just a second here. But I do want to say, when you're talking about the Saints, the cap is weird, man, with the Saints. And listen, I would give them more space about it if they were winning more. Because we see the Eagles do this kind of stuff. We see the Buccaneers do some of this kind of stuff. But, the Buccaneers are in the playoffs. And the Eagles are competing for Super Bowls, And, listen, what are the Saints getting out of all this, right? Out of all this kind of wacky tobacco financial rigmarole they like to run themselves through, what are they getting out of it? I mean, it's just kind of mediocrity on top of mediocrity. I mean, if a team wants to do it, if that's the way they like to live, and they feel like they're more comfortable, that's fine, But what are they getting out of it, man? I'm going to drop that back on you real quick first here. What are the Saints really getting out of this? Because they ain't won much since the big guns left the building, right?
Yeah, every year I think they get a few months of owner appeasement out of it. I think for a few months the owner is satisfied that they've done everything they can to build a championship roster with whatever assets they cobble together. But no, I think that's a lot of what it is. Like, I think they're getting pressure from up top to stay competitive any way they can. And for whatever reason, this front office and this ownership group has just been, really married to a core that is from the Drew Brees era. They're still kicking the Cam Jordan tires. Mario Davis, Alvin Kamara just actually got re-signed. We'll see if Ryan Ramczyk ever plays again. They did part ways with Marshawn Lattimore this past season, but you kind of felt like, okay, maybe this is a step towards them blowing it up and just looking themselves in the mirror and kind of arriving at the conclusion that every outside viewer has already, and it's just you guys aren't going to get there. I mean, you're going to win 7, 8 games consistently, sure, and you're going to box yourself out of a top 10 pick while also, having a very, very low ceiling in the playoffs if you even make them. So, I mean, it's a tough team to kind of like not just analyze, but also kind of project for, because you can say, well, if I were doing things, or if they ran a normal organization, this is probably what would happen, but they don't. So I mean, you can more often just kind of bet on them doubling and tripling down on a core that they believe in for some reason. And they believe in it enough to say, hey, if we just get Derek Carr in the building, I think we're winning the division.
That's it, baby.
That's it. But no, it's a frustrating group, especially because, like, I don't know, like I liked a lot of what they were doing for a while there, and they just weren't really able to pivot proactively. And now I feel like they think they might have missed their window to do so, and now are just kind of, having panic off seasons every single year. But Keebler with a lot of aura takes in the chat. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Keebler.
A team worse than the Giants. I do think this is a worse run organization than the Giants. I'm with you there, Keebs. So what would be your, of all their pending free agents, there's not a ton of marquee names. Like I said,
right.
they keep anybody who's even a little good, they keep as long as possible.
Right.
But who is your, outgoing free agent that you feel like is most important for New Orleans to retain?
I'm going to drop 2 names real quick, but let me be a real smart aleck first, okay? Because I just cannot resist, okay? First of all, don't re-sign anybody, okay? Quit re-signing people. Quit it. Stop doing it for 2 years.
Yeah.
Listen, clean up the cap a little bit. You don't have to get it all back to just pure filter, but clean it up a little bit, okay? Quit. But no, listen. Willie Gay is a really cheap one, man. You can sign him.
Get Ryan Poles in there.
Yeah, Ryan Poles. Yeah, Willie Gay. For depth, for starter, whatever. But Gay's a good fast linebacker, experienced, been around at both organizations, the Chiefs winning and the Saints. Listen, he's not as good as he was 2 seasons ago, but he wasn't. He was with the Chiefs then. He looked better. All right, so he's fine. He can eat up a lot of snaps if you want him to, 500-600 snaps. Again, whether he's a rotation guy, whether you got to start him, that's uber cheap. The other one is Paulson Adebo. Listen, Adebo has not truly panned out here as a legit cover corner that you just feel good about dropping him off on an island. But, man, goodness, the guy can do so many different things. He's such an athlete. You can drop him in anywhere and do just kind of stuff that not everybody in the league can do. So, you'd probably have to give him a 2-year deal. It would probably be anywhere from $10 to $14 million. It's not expensive. It's not cheap. But that's a good guy to just keep in the building. He's still young, So I really like him. Would I love to see him develop more? Sure. But still, I like him on the field. I really do. I like this guy. So if you don't re-sign him, somebody else is going to. He's going to go be a part of somebody else's secondary and produce for them. So that would be the one I would really love to see.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, I mean, they've let, as much as we kind of belabor they keep re-signing everybody, a couple of guys they've let walk, as they go into their second contract, have been huge misses on the Saints' part. Trey Hendrickson, Zach Bond, what these guys they bow out on, that they drafted and developed and are just kind of about to hit their prime.
Right.
Those are the guys they back off on, and these 30-somethings are the ones on whom they really double down. So, Keebler's thinking Chase Young, who is still young, no name change yet.
Yeah.
But yeah, I had Paulson Adebo as well. And I think, you've got Brandon Staley coming in as DC, Fangio guy. a lot of people weren't huge fans of the hiring, but if you're going to come in here and you are going to let Staley have some real ownership over the defense and the scheme, which it sounds like they will. You're going to want to have a strong, smart, athletic secondary who can make some plays and who can come down on the football. I think Alontae Taylor's a great fit for it. If they get a little bit more growth out of Kool-Aid McKinstry and you bring back Paulson Adebo, I think you feel pretty good about the secondary there. And like I said, it's a team that last season they were actually 12th in EPA against the pass.
Mm-hmm.
You have Tyrann Mathieu back. How much gas does he have left in the tank? We'll see. I'm going to have to figure something out at safety and kind of go from there. But I think, bringing Adebo back is going to be an important thing. Before we jump to an outside free agent that you like for them, I'm just going to run down some of their season end rankings here. 25th in offensive EPA per pass, 10th in EPA per rush on the offensive side, 25th in quarterback pressure rate allowed. Again, 12th in defensive EPA against the pass, 30th in defensive EPA against the run, and 21st in pressure rate as a defense. So who are you looking at as an outside free agent? Once they move all this money around and figure it out, they're going to make a couple additions. So who kind of caught your eye as a Saints addition? Both, maybe it's something you feel that's realistic. But even if it's even if it kind of zags against the way the Saints usually operate, who would be your favorite fit on this team here with the new coaching staff?
Yeah, so this is tough because you're trying to, and again, the key word is realistic, right? You're trying to look through this list of players that are going to be somewhat coveted to varying degrees on the free agent list. You're like, well, who can the Saints afford? Because if they do, like you said, start clearing all the space, they really shouldn't be affording many of these guys, but somebody. The name that instantly came to mind was just DJ Reed. Okay, you talk about I'm a big believer in building on strengths if you can. So DJ Reed would come in and be an instant cover guy. And again, there's some debate about just how good Reed is on his own, but he is better than a lot out there. And again, he wouldn't be super expensive. When you look over at the cornerbacks in this year's free agent market, they're not all going to hit in free agency, but the ones that do, man, you're looking at somewhere between 12 to 18 mil cap hit. Those are not huge cap hits. And some of these guys are 26 to 28 years old. They've still got 3 to 4 good seasons. DJ Reed is one of those guys. So you talk about putting Reed into the secondary and maybe transforming them. What's going to get the Saints over into the playoffs, right? Well, if we could take this pretty good defensive secondary that's pretty good against the pass, drop in a Reed, kind of reshuffle everybody here in the secondary, I would feel good about that. So Reed was a guy that I liked in a lot of places. He's a guy I like here for the Saints. And again, it's going to cost you something, but he's not going to be super expensive. So DJ Reed's a name right there.
I like DJ Reed. I stuck with the secondary too, actually, and I like Cam Bynum for them. As much as I'd like the Vikings to retain him, I think he was pretty solid in 2022 under Ed Donatel, who is from the same tree as Brandon Staley.
Okay.
I think he'd be a pretty nice compliment to Tyrann Mathieu. Will Harris, I think, started next to Mathieu last season. He's a free agent as well. I think if you can maintain the strength of that passing defense, and maybe you get some more pass rush in the draft, I think you feel pretty good about that. And I like DJ Reed too, because then at that point, you feel less reliant on a guy like Kool-Aid McKinstry right away.
Yep.
And maybe that's an instance too where Paulson Adebo does walk, and you bring in DJ Reed as a replacement to kind of maintain status quo a little bit, and then target the draft from there, or try to develop Kool-Aid as well alongside Alontae Taylor and the other guys they got in the building. So I like that one. Let's jump to to the Carolina Panthers. Now, this is a team that showed some decent flashes towards the end of last season. What's kind of like your temperature on Carolina right now? I mean, the defense was a disaster after Derek Brown went down. There's just not enough talent there. And there's not a ton of talent on the offense either. But you saw some good signs from Bryce Young. Guys like Jalen Coker emerged. Xavier Leggett still could be something. So they've got a few pieces. Dave Canales in year 2 now. Jiro Evero in year 2 now. What's kind of your temperature on Carolina in general before we jump into free agent to retain?
It feels good. You have hope, but boy, it's cautious. You feel like, man, we need to take another step this year if you're anybody in Carolina, because we know how subject to kicking everybody out the owner Tepper is. That's kind of the feeling. And to be honest, listen, Panthers fans will support a winner en masse, but they have kind of sort of gotten a little lukewarm on the team over the past, decade or so. Just hasn't been a whole lot to really enjoy, more or less. So, for a team, listen, you go around the NFL, around the nation, I don't know how many people would even miss the Panthers if they dropped out of sight, So you really feel like, hey, we need to get back to another step. We need to get back to respectable. We need to get back to just being solid before we start thinking about Super Bowls around here. That's the vibe check. It's like, yeah, we like this. This gives us hope. But, we just hit the reset button again another season or two. Don't do that. Let's grow a little bit here. So that's the vibe check here, okay? And that's really, what I'm feeling on the Panthers thing.
Yeah, I'm kind of right there with you. I think, I think it could be a team that takes a big step this year. If they kind of execute everything the right way, if you get just a better ecosystem around Bryce, that includes Dave Canales. I think he was great for him in their first year together, and they'll kind of have to see where he takes them. I think this is another. There's a lot riding on this season for them because it's very much a what do we have here? We've got to figure that out. What do we have at the quarterback position, and do we like it? You have now established a strong running game to complement Bryce, which is something that he's going to need to be effective, to have a strong play action game, to not have as much on his shoulders as a thrower. And I think that's going to be nice for them. So they were actually 12th in EPA per rush. I mean, this is a division that was all 4 of these teams were top 12 rushing offenses. None of them were great elsewhere, but it's a good running division. Carolina was 29th in EPA per pass, 12th in EPA per rush. The offensive line held up okay, actually, and Bryce did a decent job mitigating pressure. They were 17th in pressure rate allowed, 31st in defensive EPA per pass, 31st in defensive EPA per rush, 32nd in pressure rate on the defensive side. God-awful defense. Yeah. When you comb through their pending free agents, they do sit with about $17 million in cap space. They are going to be letting Shaq Thompson walk. They announced that, so he's not necessarily part of this discussion. And they do have some decent cap flexibility. I mean, Robert Hunt would be a pretty big restructure, pretty easy button to hit there. They got some aging veterans they could part ways with if they wanted to, and Clowney and Adam Thielen and guys like that, and they could clean slate it pretty easily. But what's the outgoing guy who you feel like is most important to retain?
So I'm going to go in a really weird direction here, but there is a method to this madness, okay? It's going to be Cade Mays, who was actually a restricted free agent. You can bring it back for nothing, okay? Pennies on the dollar. But here's the reason why, okay? It's not because Mays is so great, which he's fine. The offensive line last year ate up 32% of the salary cap, okay? Which is fine. You're not paying a quarterback. The defense is kind of getting rebuilt. I get it. I have no problem with that. But here's the cap hits for 2024 that the Panthers had. Ikemi Kwanu at left tackle, $8.8 million. Damian Lewis at left guard, $14.5 million. Robert Hunt at right guard, $21.7 million. Taylor Moton over there at right tackle, $31.3 million. Okay, so look, you got Austin Corbett, who was going to be your main center, and Brady Christensen also as the center, who both got injured this year. Cade Mays played some center and was okay. He wasn't brilliant. He wasn't great. He's not your next 5 years guy. But you talk about a guy you bring in for nothing, you keep for nothing, and you plug him into the middle of a pretty good offensive line, right? Pretty solid. And that allows you to let Corbett and Christensen go. You don't have to try to reinvest money in them to keep this offensive line together. It's already a pretty good offensive line. So Cade Mays really would be the guy here. Literally, these RFA, ERFA contracts are pennies on the dollar. These guys get nothing like what they deserve, and that's fine. It's the way the system is built. But that really is the one there. Slowly but surely over the next 2 to 3 seasons, you invest a little bit less money in that offensive line, a little bit more in defense, and maybe ultimately you hope you have to pay your quarterback because that means he's playing well.
Yeah, and I like that too. Yeah, Corbett's slated to walk, and we just saw from the Super Bowl winner, not to take anything away from Cam Jurgens, but we just saw from the Super Bowl winner how much you can kind of raise the floor of a center's play by flanking him with just some motherfuckers at guard. And you've got those in Damian Lewis and Robert Hunt.
Yeah.
So, I do like that. That might be an area where you can kind of, play a little bit of money ball because you've kind of set yourself up to have a really good, kind of supporting cast for that center. And a guy, who has played and Bryce has taken snaps from. I really like the thinking there. I went with Jordan Fuller. I just a captain that Rams defense. Evero is another Fangio style guy, and Fuller was a captain under Brandon Staley in LA. Had a decent year. Again, I mean, this is not a guy who's going to blow you away, much like Cade Mays, but I think a guy who you could bring back for relatively cheap in a pretty potent safety market, at least at the top right now, who you could bring back for 2 years, 12, or something like that, just to be one of those veteran mainstays and just something you can kind of check off and not worry about. Because they're going to have plenty of holes to fill. I think that's something you can kind of set and forget, and you feel pretty good about having an average starter at that position, and you can kind of work from there. Again, not a ton to say about him, but Evero is going to call. He's going to disguise a lot of cover 3. He's going to get into the quarter half kind of stuff. They're going to keep it pretty too high, and Fuller is just rarely caught out of position. So that's a fit I like. Who is the outside free agent that you like for Carolina?
All right, I couldn't resist, man. I went daydreaming here. Okay, all right. I'm gonna fish around a little bit, go a little daydreaming here. All right, so this ain't gonna happen, and I know it, but we daydreaming. Okay, T. Higgins from Cincinnati. Okay, now. I believe that the Bengals are going to work this out. I don't know how. They have cash flow problems. It's hard for them to re-sign these bigger contracts because you have to have so much darn money in escrow. It's just hard for them to do that. They're on the bottom end of the league in terms of cash flow. I figure they'll figure this out because that's what Joe Burrow wants. Joe Burrow has made it abundantly clear he wants that to happen. But if it doesn't, where does he go? He'd be a benefit anywhere. I like it for Carolina, not only because they really need somebody to throw the football to. Boy, I would love to give Bryce Young a good receiver to throw the football to, a big target, all right? Not just a speedster that you kind of have to X and O and scheme and all that. Just a big target. You can throw the football up to T. Higgins. So I really like that. That's why Joe Burrow likes him. You just throw the football up and Higgins can go get it. So, and Higgins is more than that. Higgins is a good receiver. But I would really like that. But it also – I mentioned at the outset, Carolina has struggled to just even be relevant the past few seasons. Boy, they've just kind of dipped out of sight, And bringing in somebody like Higgins may never lead you to a Super Bowl, but it all of a sudden puts a little bit of respect back on your name as a franchise. It restores some of what you lose when you see, the Brian Burns head out the door and the Christian McCaffrey head out the door. And I'm not criticizing those moves, but to get somebody back in there that the league kind of respects, I like that. So again, not going to happen, but a fella can dream, right?
Yeah. Let's sell some jerseys, right?
Yes.
Go make a splash. No, I like it. So I went with. I mentioned this team was 32nd in pressure rate. There are 32 teams in the league. So I went with Josh Sweat for Carolina here. I think he's going to be similar-ish to what their idea was with Jadeveon Clowney, and you do still have Clowney for a year here. But I mean the edge, your starting edge group was DJ Wanham, Jadeveon Clowney, Yetur Gross-Matos. So I think getting a boost on the edge and expecting Derek Brown back on the interior with just those two kind of I mean, Brown just getting healthy again was a game wrecker early in the season, and then adding Sweat to that, who's coming off a great year, deserves a payday, and I think suddenly you might have a pretty close to league average pass rush with those two guys healthy, including a Jadeveon Clowney. Maybe you supplement the edge group with a rookie as well, just to kind of get in the mix. But I think pass rush is the most important thing they could address on the defensive side anyway, and kind of build everything out from there. Because Evero, again, I mean, he wants to rush for and disguise his coverages. That's not going to work well. Right. When none of those four can generate pressure on their own. Sweat, 14.2% pressure rate this season, if I'm not mistaken, 14 point something, solid, and he's got good size. He can, can be on the edge in your 4-2 nickel, can also rush from a 2-point stance in base. So I like that fit. One of the best edge rushers on the market. And also kind of in that age range where, he could be part of like the next phase of the Panthers and kind of, be a mainstay of the next good Panthers team, which I think is going to be something they should really prioritize in this year's free agency is long-term equity as much as they can. Not that he's a spring chicken, but he's got deep season championship experience, as well as being on the right side of 30. So I like that fit for the Panthers here. Let's jump. Might as well jump to the Falcons. Now, this is another team in the red. And I'm not just talking about their uniforms. This is a team that is currently slated for about negative $12 million in cap space.
Yeah.
And they're going to have to make some shit shake here to get back on the right side of things. But again, this is another team with a lot of easy buttons to push. Jesse Bates is an easy restructure. What they end up doing with Kirk Cousins could play into this. It sounds like he's going to be the backup. He's going to be the best paid backup of all time. And we'll see how that goes for him. They got a lot of good skill guys on the offense. I do like their offensive line. They've got some pieces on the defensive side. It's not a terrible team. And for most of the season, it looked like they were going to win this division, and I picked them to win it in the preseason, but still haven't quite figured it all out. We'll see what they do with Penix here.
Yeah.
Of these players slated to hit free agency from the Falcons, what was your most important player to retain?
Yeah, for me, it was Drew Dahlman. I'll get into him in just a second. When I looked at this whole group of free agents for the Falcons,
That's correct.
I didn't necessarily feel like I got to keep us, these 4 or 5 guys. It's not a super high talent group of free agents sitting here. So if you're tight on finances, you can kind of sort of feel like, hey, we can let a lot of these guys walk if we need to. Sign the cheap ones for stability in the depth. Don't count on 5th-round draft picks for depth. Resign these cheap guys who are already part of our system for the depth, and then go fishing in the draft for the upgrades and the holes. But Drew Dahlman was the guy because, boy, you talked about Penix there coming in and playing. You really would like to keep him familiar there. And then you mentioned the offensive line is pretty good. I like this offensive line. To me, it is not the greatest pass blocking offensive line, but it's pretty good. And I like it in run blocking.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of where I'm at. But I would love to keep it together. And again, he's not going to cost you a lot. You can get him a 2 or 3 year deal for somewhere in the neighborhood of $6, $8, $9 million a season. I mean, that's nothing to fill a hole in your offensive
Mm-hmm.
line, and Dahlman fills it pretty well. I like him. So that was the one for me.
Yeah, it was Drew Dahlman for me all day as well. And just the importance of a quality veteran center for a young quarterback. I mean, look at what Tyler Biotish did for Jaden Daniels this season. Just going out and prioritizing, hey, we need to have especially a guy who can handle some of the protection setting responsibilities for a young quarterback is really important. Somebody who can kind of shoulder that load, ID the mic, check into slides and be a part of that process. So there isn't as much on Michael Penix's shoulders. Not that he can't shoulder it, but you love to have that, that tandem there and that sort of committee when you've got a young quarterback who's going to have a lot to think about and a lot that he'll be in charge of as well. So I was Drew Dahlman all day as well. And if he does hit the market, he's probably going to be the most sought after center in the NFL. So I think you re-sign him expeditiously. Before we jump to outside free agents, Atlanta was 15th in EPA per pass this season on the offensive side, 11th in EPA per rush, 20th in pressure rate allowed, which is pretty good given the rest of the ecosystem within the offense and Kirk Cousins' kind of inability to mitigate pressure as an athlete. I mean, he does well to navigate the pocket, but he's not going to rescue it. And again, this is a team that and under Zach Robinson as offensive coordinator, you want to be able to run your wide zone and run your boots off of it. Turn your back to the defense on deep play action sets and hit the deep shot to Darnell Mooney, hit the big dig to Drake London. You want to be able to set up the Bijan Robinson screen and get these guys moving. And they were stuck, pass blocking in straight pass sets, straight drop back, much too often for a unit like this. This unit was not maximized the way the offense was run, and they should be able to access more of that with Michael Penix under center. Better athlete, just will do better to maneuver the pocket. So I think you keep this group intact. It's it might be a top 10 offensive line that performed like a bottom third offensive line just because of the positions they were put in, and not necessarily playing strengths. On the defensive side, they were 29th in defensive EPA per pass, 23rd in defensive EPA per rush, and 31st in pressure rate on the defensive side. So who is your favorite outside free agent to bring into this group?
Okay, I don't do this on my other shows. You inspire me, okay? But I'm going to ask you, the crazy in me, okay?
Okay.
Can I sign 3 guys? Is that okay?
Oh, yeah. There are no rules.
Okay.
Very loose parameters around these segments.
I want to fix up the secondary, all right? So and listen, I'm not worried about finances here. This is not me, the GM, sitting down here and carefully thinking about finances and how to be judicious and what. Forget that. This is just me being fun, okay? I want to fix the secondary. So I'm going to go pick up Byron Murphy, 27-year-old cornerback. I can get him for, 3-4 seasons at, $17, $18, $19 million a season. I'm going to go pick up Carlton Davis, 28 years old when the season starts. I can get him at 3 seasons. I'll probably get him at 15 mil a season. It would not be super expensive unless a handful of teams start chasing him and the price start going up there. And then I'm going to go pick up safety, Trevon Merrick from the Raiders, okay? He's 26 years old when the season starts, okay? I'm going to go get all 3 of these guys, and we're going to address edge rushers in the draft, but we're going to fix up the secondary here in free agency. I'm going to get Byron Murphy, Carlton Davis, and Trevon Merrick, put them with the guys we already got, and we're going to upgrade the secondary. And I'm pretty excited about it because now we can cover a little bit better. And I've got a safety there in Merrick who, I don't know, kind of a poor man's version of the guy Metellus you guys got at the Vikings. He can do a lot of different stuff, just kind of move them all around, in the box, out of the box, cover, a lot of different crap there. So I like it. That's 3 different guys I'm going with.
I like that. I had a similar thought. I think they should be drafting edge as well. But let's just hope to God there isn't a tight end or a wide receiver they fall in love with in the first round, because they will take
just like that.
Yeah, but if Terry Fontenot can control himself a little bit, I think that's the way to go. And I had Rasul Douglas here for them. I mean, they played something like 77% zone coverage. They had the lowest press rate in the league last season, which was a big departure actually from the season prior. You've got a guy like AJ Terrell, who can really get in your jersey as a corner, but they allowed the highest completion rate in the league because they're playing a lot of this off zone, and I don't feel like they had the guys to really trigger down and who were comfortable in that. And Rasul Douglas coming from Buffalo. That's a team who ran even a higher percentage of zone than Atlanta, and Rasul extremely comfortable as a quarters corner, as a cover 2 corner, and as a deep boundary cover 3 corner, all while playing off coverage. He doesn't take many false steps. He doesn't necessarily bail too early. He's a guy who's going to be in position. He's had a lot of really solid seasons in a row now since that breakout year in Green Bay. And I think he's got a little bit more gas left in the tank, especially if Buffalo wants to kind of continue this process of getting younger and reinvigorating the secondary around a guy like Christian Benford and maybe is comfortable letting a veteran walk. It also feels like a Falcons addition in this kind of window they're in, sort of a win now addition, maybe a $12 million veteran, maybe it's even a 1-year deal, and you're saying, hey, let's go win the division. But no, I was thinking secondary as well. So right there with you. Well, let's get to the best of the bunch. Even though I gotta go, I'm gonna go find Keebler's nickname for him here quick before we get started. I think he called him the sucka schmears. Sucka smears, he says. So that's a new one for me. I don't mind that one. Tampa Bay easily graded out as the best team in this division last season. This offense was great under Liam Cohen. Cohen is gone, but it's going to be Josh Grizzard, who was the pass game coordinator last season. So they are keeping it in-house. It's not going to be a third new face in 3 seasons for Baker. So, maybe they can keep some similar principles in place. Maybe they can keep that screen game dynamic as it was last season. And they were 4th in EPA per pass, 6th in EPA per rush, 2nd in pressure rate allowed. This was one of the best offensive lines in football, potentially the best tackle duo in football with the emergence of Luke Gadecki. And then on the defensive side, 22nd in EPA per pass, probably weighted down by those 2 Falcons games where they just got slaughtered for some reason. 12th in EPA per rush allowed, and 8th in pressure as a group. And a lot of that was kind of manufactured. Not a lot of great individual winners on the defensive line, but Todd Bowles did a great job to pick his spots and generate pressure schematically as well. So outgoing free agents, who is most important to you for the Bucs to re-sign?
I hate to go so
500K
obvious.
in cap.
Yeah, yes, with all that money they
It's
got to throw around.
yeah.
Listen, I hate to go obvious, but here it is. For me, it was Chris Godwin. I didn't see anybody else even close. Listen, uh, Baker Mayfield's finally found a
You got
home.
to.
He finally looks really good. And why would you want him to set up? And I listen, I know maybe this isn't a Super Bowl team, but boy, do they scare everybody. Nobody really wanted to play this team in the playoffs, right? The Eagles didn't want to play this team in the playoffs. The Eagles got a heck of a team, right? So why would you want to take a step back? I'm not a huge fan of just throwing finances around when you're kind of just barely above average, but this was a dangerous team last year. So why make Baker Mayfield have to go hunt a new, second receiver or first receiver on some plays? I just wouldn't do it. I know they got Jalen McMillan back there, and I do like his potential to get better in the future. He did some things last year. But why mess that up? If you were to let this guy go, to me, a great test of how good a player is. If you were to let him go, how many other teams would be all over this guy? And I guarantee a lot of people would be all over this guy. Okay, Chris Godwin. So that's it for me. I want Godwin back in the building.
Yeah, it's got to be Chris Godwin. You spoke to the chemistry with Baker Mayfield, and I spoke about the screen game. He was a huge part of that. These tunnel screens and these bubbles to Chris Godwin were explosive play generators for this team. And sure, maybe you can find a guy who can be dynamic after the catch in the screen game and feel okay about replacing that. But you're getting both that and a guy who is a clinical route runner and a really sure-handed player. Another holdover from the Super Bowl team to kind of keep that intact. Jason Light has certainly prioritized keeping that group intact the best he can. And so I think they're going to be pretty motivated to retain him, and you've got to think Baker's going to want him back too, let alone Todd Bowles and the coaching staff. So pretty obvious one for me too, but sometimes that's all you can do. They don't have a lot of impact guys on their way out. So if you're going to move some things around for a guy, I think Chris Godwin's certainly a worthy one. So. Outside free agents, who do you like for Tampa Bay?
I think this is my favorite one when you mix realism with fit and everything else. Okay, so listen, the defense was pretty rough last year, but I like the people they got. I like the people in the secondary. I like the people they're working through here on the defensive line. They should all take another kind of a mini step forward next year because they're all so darn young. Most of them, not all of them. They got a couple of the old ones, but still, you got a good mixture there. Listen, Zach Vaughn from the Eagles, man, at linebacker. Okay, you even mentioned it with those two Falcons games when they got torched by Kirk Cousins. A large part of that was Kirk Cousins throwing over the middle and taking advantage of Kenny Britt at linebacker in the passing game. But anyway, just the Buccaneers defense too kind of lends itself to being given yardage over the middle because they want to stop the run, they want to get on the quarterback, they want to eliminate explosives. So but boy, if you could plug in Zach Vaughn there, and I think there's a real chance the Eagles let him walk, and he wouldn't be super expensive here. You talk about just a really good linebacker who had his career year. He won't be as good for you as he was last year for the Eagles, okay? He just won't be. But still a guy who can move all around, who can drop back into pass coverage very well, very intelligent player, and who can help against the run. I really love Zach Vaughn. I think it would fill a major hole here on this Buccaneers defense.
I really thought we were about to have the same player.
Sorry.
But we still had a very, very similar idea.
Okay.
So I could really, I think he could really contribute to the pass rush as well in Tampa.
Yep. Right.
The way Todd Bowles calls his blitzes. I mean, remember how dynamic of a blitzer Devin White was in this very system next to Levante David. Zach Vaughn could fill that, when Devin White was good role.
Right.
And kind of, pick that back up. Now mine is a a bit less of a coverage player, but he played off ball at Ohio State, and that's Baron Browning, who I
Yeah.
think would be a really nice fit. He's
Right.
kind of in as a pass rusher. He's kind of in that Shaq Barrett mold. Speedy edge bender, pretty good length, quick athletic guy.
Mm-hmm.
Just kind of in Denver, they end up moving him to Arizona. It just kind of became with the emergence of Nick Bonito and the re-signing of Jonathan Cooper. It was just kind of a embarrassment
Yeah.
of riches over there with these young guys who they feel like could grow into something. So I really like Baron Browning's fit here. Just put him opposite Yaya Diaby, who was great as a rookie, and suddenly you've got just a really speedy pass rush between Diaby, Kalijah Cansey,
Right.
Baron Browning, Joe Tryon, Shoyinka will still be in the mix, and Vita Vea in the middle. And you add him to a defense that was 8th in pressure rate last season, not the best individual winner, but a guy you can really move around and get really creative with as a blitzer, and that would be perfect for Todd Bowles and this group. This is the most complete roster as far as having the fewest
Yeah.
holes of all these
Absolutely.
teams, and
Absolutely.
and I think you can't really overinvest in pass rush. So I really like Baron Browning again, younger guy who can be part of your team for a long time. You might be able to tie him down on a relatively long-term deal, with a pretty high ROI if he does kind of hit his stride over the
Yep.
course of it. I mean, you could get him on a 3 years, 27 or something like that, 8-9 mil a year.
Mm-hmm.
And if
Yep.
you get really good, you sign him to the what the Panthers gave DJ Wanham, for example. I think you'd get better production out of Baron Browning,
Right.
particularly in this system. So yeah, I dug around a little bit for that one, but I've always been a huge fan of Baron Browning, and I do think he could have some off-ball flexibility for you. Not even necessarily just as a dropper off the line of scrimmage. I think you could legitimately line him up off ball and throw some curveballs at offenses with the off ball experience he
Right.
has
Right.
at Ohio State.
Yeah. Exactly. No, I like that as well. I would not have thought
All
of that
right.
one, but I like that one
Well,
as well.
sure. Yeah. No. We were, in a similar vein though. It was as you started kind of prefacing yours, I was like, oh shit, if he pulls Baron Browning, I'm gonna lose it. But speaking of Ohio State and colleges and things, actually, I lied. We've got one more overarching kind of division question here. I might have shown my card a little bit early, but what is your favorite roster / situation in this division kind of going forward? For both kind of short and long term. Like if you were, hey, I get to pick a GM job to take. Which job would you take in this division?
Hey, for me, it's Tampa Bay. I think that's where you're heading as well. I feel like Jason Light has done a good job. I tell you what I like, and again, I don't necessarily need all the heightened financial stuff unless you're really able to start winning with it. But I'm fine if they do it. But the roster is good, and what I really like about it, they built this roster up good enough to where Tom Brady wanted to come here and play here, and then he left, and then you just kind of expected a drop off, and there wasn't one, and now you start looking at the roster and you're like, yeah, they got some old people there that are going to walk away in a year or two, but they got some young guys that are already showing out. Like it's already mixing back in. That defensive line is already kind of remaking itself here, and the offensive line is kind of already starting to remake itself here. And you're like, okay, so for the next, I don't know if I see a Super Bowl team here in the next 2 or 3 years, but I see a team that's dangerous. Has surprised me how well they have just rebuilt everything, redeveloped everything. They're not just drafting masters; they seem to be able to develop these players, and that's you see other teams that can't seem to do that sometimes. The Giants are struggling to develop a lot of the players that they draft. The Chiefs are struggling to develop edge rushers and tackles, offensive tackles. But Tampa Bay seems to be able to develop these guys too. So
Yeah.
I like where Tampa Bay is at. I like where they're heading. And, maybe it's kind of a tight window in some position groups, but I really like it. I think they've done a good job there.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think it is Tampa Bay pretty clearly. Really the only like that offense in particular, um, the only real starter you've got on its way out, if they do bring Chris Godwin back, is Ben Bredesen, who played left guard for you, and he was kind of a flyer, plugged in very well. I think that's a
Right.
pretty easily replaceable thing, particularly in the draft with the way they've drafted. With Jason Light. So, that's a pretty negligible need. Everything else is really set up and ready to go. And, outside of just whiffing on every draft pick you have this coming off season, you should be able to really round out this team into an even more complete group. And what's sad about this is I'd probably plant my flag on Atlanta if it weren't for the quarterback situation. If you weren't stuck with the albatross Kirk Cousins contract, I think that's in consideration, at least a little bit. You've got a lot of holes on the defense, but you've got some high-end players there as well, and AJ Terrell, Jesse Bates, and the husk of Grady Jarrett. We'll see how well he bounces back this season. But it's Tampa pretty comfortably. All right, Ben. Well, the floor is yours. You've had a lot more time to dive into some of these rookies. You've been able to grind some tape. I haven't yet, so I'm going to be learning a lot over the next month or so through osmosis between you and our buddy Simon, who will be on this show next Tuesday, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, March 4th. Talking a little bit of AFC North. So stick around for that, and he'll have a prospect of the week for us as well. But Ben, give us your prospect of the week. Tell us why you like him, and then once we kind of talk through it a little bit, we'll talk about what team he might fit best here in the NFC South. Go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the draft. I'm not an expert at the draft, but I love it. I literally watch this stuff year round. So I got a lot to learn, but I enjoy this. So it's Johnny Barron out of Texas. He is essentially a cornerback. That's not the only way you can use him. His number one asset is flexibility. So he played basically slot for Texas a couple of seasons ago. And then last year, they needed to kick him over to the big wide receiver. The big wide corner. So he covered the big wide receivers out there for the University of Texas in some big matchups, man. Dang it. They played Georgia. I think they played Alabama. They were playing an SEC, schedule. Big-time games, and he held up out there. So you talk about a guy who's got flexibility, good move-around interior speed. I don't necessarily think he got the big straight-line speed to just go deep with everybody, but got good mix. He loves to mix it up in the box. He loves to tackle, loves to get in there and run defense. Now, you'll hear different opinions on how good of a tackler he is. I've heard some very good guys say he's a sloppy tackler. Other guys say he never misses. I kind of think he's somewhere in between based on the stuff I've seen here out of him being a run stopper. But, boy, this is a guy you can move anywhere. I personally like him as a slot safety in the NFL. That's where I like him. He's only 5'11", so I don't necessarily want to kick him out there to these wide receivers in the NFL, be trying to cover them out there at the boundary. But this guy can do everything, and I really, really like that. He is moving up most boards right now. He was kind of sitting back there early second, mid-second round. As the NFL people have started to kind of take a look at this, he's starting to move up boards. But he may drop back down again once the process is fully done here. But you're going to see him all over the place. But I really like him. Flexible, did a lot of slot, can move out wide. Looks like he can do safety to me. Good in the box. Really like this guy.
Sweet. Yeah. So he's, a well-rounded player. And, I think we could see those kind of guys, their NFL projection and where they kind of fall once they get there sometimes depends on that athletic testing. Teams will have thresholds for cornerback. If he's running Like we mentioned Cam Bynum earlier in this show. He was a boundary corner at Baylor. Ran like a 4.62 or something like that, 4.56. There's a 6 in there. Low 4.5s, high 4.6s. And at that point they said, well, he's going to be a safety for us, even without any college safety experience. So that's very, very common. And if a guy has slot flexibility as well, that's a huge plus. And sometimes, form is a big thing. Being able to wrap up consistently is a big thing, but sometimes as a secondary player, what you're looking for most is a willing tackler, a guy who wants to mix it up, and a guy who triggers down decisively. It's easier to coach, which gap to fit, or when you're the force player and when you're the spill guy, what sort of position to be in, and things like that, than it is a guy who's just ready to go mix it up. You like a guy like Devin Witherspoon. A good tackler. But what jumps off the screen is like, this guy does not care. He's a psychopath. He's flying into the box. He's flying off the edges of blitzer. He's, just obliterating quick screens. And those are the kind of guys in the secondary that can really make it. I mean, look at what KC's secondary has done. Like, these aren't big name players. These aren't, these great cover guys, but like Chamari Connor will tackle. He loves to mix it up. So they put him in the slot and kick Trent outside. A guy like Jalen Watson is going to be a sure tackler. Justin Reed loves to hit. So, I mean, that sort of element of your secondary can be a huge boost to the defense. And I think that's something they'll be checking out. Is that what you're kind of getting off the tape? Is like, this guy's just ready to mix it up?
Not quite to the Devin Witherspoon level, right? That's the psychopath level, right?
Oh, you are, yeah.
No, but from everything I've seen, he is very willing, more than willing. He seems to enjoy getting down there in the box and mixing it up. He really does. Now, I don't know that he's got that pure head-to-head physicality. He's going to get swallowed up on guards at times, right? Moving out there in space, he'll get lost in that. But no, listen, all these running plays, stuff out in the flats, the screens and stuff, he is going to work through a lot of that and do a good job with that. He is very willing. I've seen nothing on tape that makes me think this guy doesn't enjoy being in the middle of all that chaos down low. He seems to really eat that up. Love that. And again, I don't necessarily know that he's got the Kyle Hamilton speed to kind of carry free safety over the top all that often. But again, if you're dropping into a zone coverage here, he's a guy who can stay on the field and drop into that deep zone. If you have some wide receivers you need covered who aren't T. Higgins tall, or they're not Jamar Chase fast, then he can handle the guys out there at boundary, stay on the field. But then again, his best position is going to be slot. He can hang around. His short area quickness is very good. And so that's really where he's going to excel, is slot and box. And then you can move him out on, you look to keep the guy on the field, you move him out to safety cover and to boundary one-on-one. He'll do decent there as well on limited action.
Yeah. Slightly older prospect, fifth-year senior. But really, really good ball production in 2024. 5 picks, 11 deflections. 11 deflections is a big number, at any position, at any level. That's being in the mix. He's definitely got a nose for the ball. That stuff translates. It just does. Just kind of having that instinct, having that willingness, and kind of having that, impetus to really get in the mix when the ball's in the air or when there's a ball carrier with it. So I liked Jahdae Barron. I haven't gotten a chance to watch him yet. Haven't even heard a crazy amount about him. I've heard him brought up by some guys I follow and things like that. But I did recognize him in the playoff games. He's one of those guys who kind of jumped out at you. Maybe not necessarily to like the Oh God, who was the Texas kid, the safety uh, who had that hit on on the quarterback down in the low red zone? Oh my God, he took his
Yeah,
helmet off.
I remember
Anyway,
that. I
well
don't
that
remember the
that guy
player.
was
I'm
obviously
sorry.
apparently not
Yeah.
enough for me to catalog the name either, but yeah, I remember noticing him making some plays as well, and part of a good secondary. So I like that one a lot. And I'm a secondary. I'm a sucker for secondary. So you know me well to pick a versatile cornerback for this segment. So all right. Well, sounds good. I'll have to dig into some Jade Barron here pretty soon. And this was a fun one. We are going to try to get through divisions this same way going forward. Like I mentioned, it'll be Simon Short on next week with me. We'll talk a little bit of AFC North, including his Pittsburgh Steelers. So he's got a great sense of all those teams as well. So super excited for that. And he's also a guy like yourself who is immersed in draft season. Also, so looking forward to his prospect of the week. And then, when we do these team specific previews, those are likely going to be pre-recorded. So just kind of keep an eye on the channel for those to drop as well for when we cover your favorite team with an analyst from that team. We've got a few lined up for some teams going forward, and definitely looking forward to that. Some of those will obviously take place, after free agency, which is going to open up in just a few weeks here. So, they're going to be pretty fluid. They won't all have the same layout, but ones we do prior to free agency will reflect that and, have a little bit more projection. And once we get some more information, I think they'll be even more interesting. So stick around for that. Ben, in the meantime, where else can the folks find you since they'll miss you next week?
Yeah, so we just did last week actually. We did the Minnesota Vikings over on YouTube at Sports Money KC. We did a look at the Vikings defense. We even did some player grades over there, and we did a 3-round mock draft. So go check it out. And even just tonight, we posted a full hour on the New York Giants where we looked at full grades on offense, defense, and a 3-round mock draft on the New York Giants. So working our way through some of these teams and the war rooms during the offseason.
Yeah, and I checked that Vikings video out, and guys, it's good stuff. I actually didn't get mad at it,
That's saying a lot right
which
there.
which
Yes,
has been
thank you.
it's been difficult to come by this offseason. It's been difficult to come by this offseason. There's reputable people saying JJ McCarthy tore his ACL when it was a meniscus. I mean, there's people just saying a bunch of stuff that is incorrect about the Vikings, like all the time. And I think you guys did a pretty good measured job. So definitely
Measured
go
is
check
good,
that
Coach.
out, guys. Yeah. For me, I cover the Vikings for zonecoverage.com. All my written work is up there. In the doldrums of the offseason here, it's a little bit more like once a week. But I did some player profiles. Tershawn Wharton, I wrote about. Ben, you're familiar with him. That was a fun piece to write. I also just published something on the 26th here. 26th. On the 22nd here. 26th hasn't happened yet, guys. About the Viking salary cap surplus being a bit of an optical illusion, just given the amount of outgoing snaps. They have 10,733 2024 snaps are slated to be free agents this season. That's the most in the league. So despite the surplus, it might be money more so to pay bills than it is to take a vacation to Europe. So check that one out. I broke that down a little bit. Again, that's zonecoverage.com/Vikings, where you can find all that. And like I said, we'll have a bunch of stuff coming at you. Simon Short, AFC North next Tuesday, as well as some pre-recorded stuff coming out, team-specific previews, and we'll get pretty close to post free agency. We'll have a big time draft show. Maybe we'll get both you and Simon on and talk through some stuff there. But in the meantime, guys, thanks so much for watching and sticking with us here on Bite Size Sports. We'll see you next week.